Yeah, definitely, man. Rugrats is like you said, man. It was a juggernaut, man. Uh, 20 awards during its 13-year run, 4 Daytime Emmy Awards, 6 Kid Choice Awards, and Rugrats has its own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. A cartoon has its own star on the listen, these stats, you might be able to make an argument that Rugrats should be number one.
I am the greatest, the greatest, the greatest, the greatest.
What up, though, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the GOAT Debate Podcast. So glad that you guys are joining us here for another edition of the podcast. Meech and Darius here with you, as always, for another exciting debate here at the GOAT Debate, where we like to settle once and for all who truly is the greatest of all time, or at least we like to think we do. Darius, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm excited. I'm ready to go down memory lane, if you will, and check out, some of the great points of my youth. I'm ready to go for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Darius kind of alluded to, we are going to take it back down memory lane, if you will. Take you back to the 90s. For some reason, we like the 90s here at the GOAT Debate Podcast, maybe because that's when we were in our teenage years, our formative years, our younger years, if you will. But tonight we are going to debate and discuss the best cartoons of the 90s, the best cartoons of the 90s here at the GOAT Debate. Now, what's interesting about this topic, Darius, is that some people that may be listening to this podcast may not have even been born in the 90s. Some people may have been grown in the 90s, but there was a plethora of cartoons in the 90s. I don't know if we could call it a golden era of cartoons, but there were some great cartoons throughout the 90s that we are going to discuss tonight.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the golden era, but to me, it is the best era. So I'm happy we're into it, and I think the lists that came in from the tribe and from you and from me are on one accord, as they say.
Yeah, this is probably the first debate where, when you look at the composite ranking, where we take our tribe, our great listeners, my list and Darius's list, and we kind of compiled this composite ranking. You're right. We were vibing on this particular one, and it's a first here at the GOAT Debate. So before we get into any of that, be sure, guys, if you haven't already followed us on social media, be sure to follow us at GOAT_debate on Twitter and Instagram. Search the GOAT Debate Podcast on Facebook and YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and of course subscribe to our podcast anywhere you get your podcast. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we're everywhere, so be sure to do that. We would greatly appreciate it. Well, Darius, let's go ahead and jump right into it, as we like to do. Before we get into our actual top 5 rankings, we like to talk about the first two out. Those two, in this case, cartoons who did not quite make our top 5, but they are going to get an honorable mention, if you will, tonight. And so the first one that I guess we're going to highlight here, I don't know if you want to throw it up, or you want to do a little intro, but the first one that I want to highlight here is a Disney cartoon. This cartoon was kind of more late 90s, if you will. Again, this is our first two out, our honorable mention. Late 90s cartoon, was on ABC, Disney Channel. That's kind of where I recall seeing it more often than not. The cartoon portrayed the lives of 6 fourth graders and their exploits, in school during one of our favorite times of school, which of course would be recess. So recess was one of the cartoons here that didn't quite make our top 5 list, but is getting an honorable mention because they did get a considerable amount of votes. Darius, what were your thoughts on Recess? Was that one of your favorites? What did you think of that cartoon?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed Recess. It ran for 6 seasons, so that lets you know right off the bat that it is one of the top cartoons. And there was a little bit of everything in there, lots of bullying and then life stories in there. When you talk about TJ and Vince and there's so many great Spinelli. Oh, Spinelli. Yes, oh man, there's so many great.
Blow Mikey, Gus. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. And they tried to go and pick like every type of kid you'd find in school. You'd find them on the recess playground, and you found them in this series here. So I think they did a great job of just kind of picking out the different characters of life and plucking them and putting them into this cartoon. It was one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And this is one I'm surprised that it got the amount of love that it got, particularly from the tribe, because I don't think this cartoon made either one of our top 5, but it was ranked pretty high with the tribe, considering that it was more of a late 90s cartoon. I know for me personally, I was probably past the cartoon phase at around the time Recess came out. I do recall, seeing some episodes here and there, little cousins, watching it with them, what have you. But Recess, man, like you said, it ran for 6 seasons. They had a couple of films that kind of spawned from it, not like motion pictures, but kind of little mini movies. They had Recess Schools Out. They did a Christmas movie, Miracle on 3rd Street, and a couple others as well. So yeah, man. So Recess, one of the honorable mentions tonight here on the GOAT debate as we talk about the greatest cartoons of the 90s. Now, moving on to our second honorable mention of the night. Now, this is one, Darius, that you were personally angered about because you felt like this cartoon should have been in the top 5. Now, listen, it's one of my favorites too. Didn't quite make my top 5 list, but definitely one that I enjoyed. It didn't run. How long did this one run? I'm looking here. I guess it started in it ran from 1990 to 1992. So not a considerable long, not nearly as long as Recess. So you got a couple seasons here, but very impactful because you were disgruntled about it not making the list. Steven Spielberg, one of the creators of this cartoon, highlighting some of our favorite Looney Tunes characters as little Looney Tunes. And we're talking about Tiny Toon Adventures. An honorable mention tonight. Darius, please explain to the people why you felt like this one should have been in the top 5.
Man, you talk about snubs. We usually talk about snubs right before the number 1. We're going to get to it right early this evening because Tiny Toons is definitely a snub from the top 90s cartoons. I mean, yes, it only ran from 90 to 92. All right. Given that, it still racked up 7 Emmys, daytime Emmys. You don't think about Emmys for cartoons, do you? But Tiny Toons had 7 Emmys. And it was produced by the great Steven Spielberg. And the thing about it is, he wanted something to his own name, right? He was already a big Hollywood guy. And then he didn't want to just take Bugs Bunny and the characters Daffy Duck that you know. So they wanted to put their own twist on it, which they did, which is why we saw They're not related to the big characters that we know, but they want to put their own twist on it. And the thing about it is, when Steven Spielberg gets involved, as he did, he got involved in a big way. It was maybe critical. A lot of critics might have got at him for that because he overproduced the digital quality at the time. They doubled up on the digital quality. They hired a live orchestra to perform the theme song for a cartoon.
Yeah, that's big.
It's massive, and it paid off because they did get an Emmy for the theme. So, I guess it paid off. And the reason why it only ran for 2 seasons is a little unclear. We'll get into this a little bit later, Stokes. So there is a little bit of a reason why it only ran for 2 seasons.
Technically 3, according to the stat
right
here. Yeah, technically 3.
Technically 3, 2 years, 3 seasons.
Yeah.
By the number of episodes, but there's a reason for its short run. It could have, because it was critically acclaimed. Maybe, I don't know if money had something to do with it, because like I said, it was kind of overproduced for a cartoon, but we'll get into a little bit later why it had such a short run.
Yeah. And as you alluded to, man, it won Outstanding Animated Program. It was nominated all 3 seasons that it existed. It won in 1991 and 1993. So for you to be nominated, that's a great success rate, right? To have a show that existed for 3 seasons, and all 3 seasons it was nominated for, a Outstanding Animated Series Emmy, winning 2 out of those 3 years. You gotta give it up. They also won Emmys for, you alluded to this, Outstanding Music Direction and Composition, Outstanding Original Song. Those were won in 1991. They won for Composition and Music Direction again in 92 and 93. So the music was clearly a focal point by Steven Spielberg and his team, and that paid off in 92. Even though they did not win the Outstanding Animated Program, they did win Outstanding Writing in an Animated Program. So a number of Emmys, as you said, 7 in the 3 seasons that the show existed. So you got to show some love to Tiny Toon Adventures. This could be a snub, man. Now that I'm reading up and getting all of these statistics, this could very well be one of those snubs, man. And you might, for once in the history of the GOAT debate, actually have a leg to stand on.
That's crazy. That's crazy talk.
Yeah, so for those that are just joining us, our 2 honorable mentions tonight, the first 2 out that didn't quite make our top 5 for best 90s cartoons, Recess and Tiny Toon Adventures. 2 great cartoons that we just wanted to highlight here on tonight's episode. Well, let's go ahead, Darius, and get into the list. The top 5 90s cartoons voted on by me, by you, by our great listeners out there, the tribe. We got this composite ranking, and let's start of the 90s. And we're going to start at number 5. And we kind of talked about Steven Spielberg, and we're going to continue to talk about the greatness that is Steven Spielberg, because in addition to Tiny Toon Adventures, he also created a cartoon that followed the exploits of Wacko, Yakko, and Dot. You guys might remember this cartoon as the Animaniacs, and it comes in at number 5 on our rankings of the most popular cartoons of the 90s. Animaniacs ran from 1993 to 1998. So we got 5 seasons, 99 episodes out of Animaniacs. Very, very funny cartoon, I remember just the annoyance that this cartoon actually gave like my grandparents when they saw me watching it, because it was just so goofy, so funny. It was just like, they did so many ridiculous things, but it cracked you up, man. And so I enjoyed Animaniacs thoroughly. What about you, Darius?
Man, Animaniacs was a beast on its own. You talk about the 5 seasons. You talk about 8 Emmys. How did they get these 8 Emmys? Well, Steven Spielberg took Tiny Toons Small Run. Well, he stopped that and brought everything that won these Emmys on Tiny Toons over to Animaniacs, and it really showed on how great that was. But the thing that set it apart, you talk about your grandparents, putting hair on their necks, man. Those episodes were crazy. I just rewatched it last week, and they talk about, you got one where Yakko or Whack was in a eating contest and ended up dying in this contest because he ate so much, and then the Grim Reaper came and was trying to take him to parts unknown, and the rest of the Animaniacs didn't want. It was a mess. I mean, they were on fire that series. So I love that. It's very, very interesting. And the crazy thing about it is that it was popular for all ages. It was popular, for the young kids, 6 to 11, 2 to 11, and also for those 25 and up. It appealed to everybody.
Yeah, that was crazy. It's funny that you bring that up, because I was actually going to throw that stat out there. So Animaniacs, as far as popularity ratings, second most popular children's show among both kids ages 2 to 11 and 6 to 11. At that time, the king of popularity was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but Animaniacs was a very close second. Now, the craziest part was in 1995, right? More than 1/5 of the weekday, audience viewers were 25 years old or older. So they actually had, as you alluded to, it appealed to all ages. 1/5 of their viewership was 25 years old or older. Now, I don't know if that's because it was parents watching with their kids. That could have been, it could have been that dynamic, or people just liked Animaniacs. I mean, listen, it was very popular. Multiple award wins. Its first major award in its very first season, they won a Peabody Award, which is a very popular award, for cartoons. As you alluded to, multiple Emmys as it relates to the music composition. Again, that was a kind of a hallmark of Steven Spielberg. He did it with Tiny Toons. He brought it over to Animaniacs, and man, what a immensely popular cartoon, and definitely one of my favorites. Kind of surprised it came in at number 5, but there are some other powerhouses, if you will, that are ranked above it. And so, we'll get right into it and go into number 4 on our list. And we're going to shift here from. Oh, before we do that, probably want to add this blurb. Shout out to everybody in the chat room throwing up their comments. I saw Portia was in the chat room throwing up some comments. I saw my homeboy James in there. I say my homeboy. He is my homeboy, but he's also my cuz. Throw us some love. Animaniacs was off the chain. He loved Animaniacs. He also felt like Tiny Toons should have been in the top 5. So clearly James is a Steven Spielberg cartoon supporter. So shout out to James. Shout out to everybody that's throwing up comments in the chat room. We appreciate the love and support. Now, number 4, we shift from, the Steven Spielberg, Warner Brothers world, and we go to really these guys have been the king of probably the cinematic universe lately with all of the movies, the Marvel movies. Obviously, we're shifting gears to Marvel, but we're not talking about the Avengers. We're not talking about Captain America or the Hulk or Thor or any of those guys. We're talking about X-Men. X-Men comes in at number 4 on our list of the most popular cartoons of the 90s. Debuted in 1992, ran till 1997. So we got 5 seasons, 76 episodes out of the X-Men cartoon. Of course, you got Cyclops, you got Wolverine, you got Rogue, you got Beast, you got Gambit, Jean Grey, the whole crew, the X-Men. Now, Darius, interesting about this cartoon. This cartoon was voted number 1 by the tribe. So it came in at number 4 on our composite list because we didn't have it ranked in our personal top 5s. But it got enough votes from the tribe and its point value was able to sneak it in at number 4 on our list, but got the most votes from the tribe.
And that's the way to go. Sometimes, it's called the GOAT debate, right? It's not called the GOAT. So it goes that way sometimes, Stokes. But nonetheless, it is a great cartoon. It was not my personal favorite, but it has got the accolades being it helped transform Marvel. Okay, so let's talk about it. There was a lot of problems with this show. All right, this show almost didn't make it. This is not the first Marvel cartoon that they tried to get on TV. This is their second attempt. First one was Pride of the X-Men in 1989. So this series that we're talking about came out in 92. 89 was the first attempt. Right? That nobody picked it up. Nobody was interested. The story wasn't interesting enough. So they try again a couple years later. The first 2 shows had a ton of errors because the South Korean animation team refused to fix them before they went live. Like, what is going on? How do you have a show that you've been working so hard to get on the air and it's just full of errors? You add that up with Marvel's bankruptcy in 96. We only ran for 5 seasons. Well, a whole season worth of cartoons was funded by Sabian, who project. So there was a lot of errors and problems with this X-Men cartoon. But Stokes, what some fans may be happy about is that it did last for 5 seasons despite all the issues, and because of the success, Sabian was able to turn and pitch another project you might have heard of, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, because he had this show in his bag.
Heard of it.
Yeah, small show.
Yeah, well, despite all of those problems, despite all of those issues, Darius, X-Men will go on to be one of the most critically acclaimed cartoons ever, right? It actually was voted by IGN back in 2009. They did a list of their top 100 animated shows ever, and X-Men came in at number 13. So very highly regarded in the annals of animated history, if you will. So got to give credit to X-Men for that. High ratings, for a Saturday morning cartoon. It's hailed as a pioneer for kind of your more mature cartoons, right? It was, the content, it wasn't your typical Saturday morning kind of goofy anvil drops on your head cartoon. It was, it was a little violent, had a little more mature content, but even with that, it garnered a lot of success. And so if you guys have never seen X-Men, the animated series, which I would be shocked if you grew up in the 90s and didn't see it, it's now available for streaming on Disney Plus. So if you want to go back for nostalgia's sake and check it out, it is available for you there. All right, man. So now we are into the top 3 as we continue on this trek, this journey of talking about the best cartoons of the 1990s. And this one, I feel like at number 3 should be, oh boy, it should be number 2 or number 1. It's not, but it should be. It was number 2 on my personal list, and I almost regret putting it at number 2 because I really felt like it could have been like 1B, because my 1, that could have been 1A, and this one could have been 1B. We kind of talked about the mature content that X-Men provided, and this cartoon was cut from that same cloth, kind of cut from that same mold. And we jump from, the Spielberg universe to the Marvel universe to the DC universe, where we document the happenings in the fictional city known as Gotham, with the Dark Knight himself, Batman. Coming in at number 3, we got Batman, the animated series, one of, by far, the greatest cartoons ever created. Batman, the animated series, ran from 1992 to 1995. Based on its original air dates, you got 4 seasons out of it, 85 episodes, debuted in 92, ran until 95. And in those 3 years, one of the most impactful cartoons ever.
Well, I didn't have it as high on my list, and I don't feel bad at it at all because the top 2 are amazing.
You should feel bad.
Okay, I should feel bad, probably not, but I will again give it its credit where credit is due for Emmys in that time period. It's either a 2-season length or a 4-season length, depending on how you chop up the amount of episodes. So in that time, there was a lot of good things here. I think I thought it was interesting that they dusted off this little-known actor by the name of Mark Hamill. Folks may know him from the Star Wars project that they had. He was the voice of the Joker. It was originally supposed to go to Tim Curry. If you may think you recognize that name, he was in Home Alone 2, I believe. But Mark Hamill was the Joker.
Also and one of the scariest beings. Tim Curry also played Pennywise the Clown in the original It, one of the scariest movies ever.
There you go. So, they had the people, but I think one of the biggest thing that came out of this is the development, the creation of the character Harley Quinn. I did not know that this was her inception, but it definitely was, and she's gone on to star in, character was featured in 2 movies, maybe more. I don't know. I don't think Birds of Prey did that well, so we'll see there. Maybe a second Suicide Squad or something up, but. Batman is a legendary character, and it's only right that he has a cartoon that makes the top best of list.
It absolutely should. And one of, again, the all-time greats when you talk about cartoons. Listen to this, Darius. IGN, we talked about them with X-Men, where they listed X-Men as the 13th greatest animated film of all. Animated series of all time. Batman the animated series, that same ranking, number 2. Number 2 behind The Simpsons. The Simpsons, of course, iconic, right? Batman the Animated Series rated the number 2 greatest animated television series ever. 4 Emmys, including Outstanding Animated Program. Wizard Magazine, another publication, ranked their greatest animated series of all time. They also ranked Batman the Animated Series number 2 behind, you guessed it, The Simpsons. TV Guide ranked them number 7 out of the 60 greatest cartoons ever. Batman the Animated Series by TV Guide, number 7 on that list. So this cartoon, Darius, how you don't give it its just due. James in the chat room referred to you as a hater. He said Batman should be number 1. Who's he hands a recount? Paul. He can't believe that Batman the Animated Series was not number, but it comes in at number 3. But it's a great cartoon nonetheless.
It's on the list, James. Relax. It's on the list.
It made the list. It made the list. If it was an honorable mention, you know, I might understand. I might understand a revolt of some sort.
Listen, it's third. That's a bronze medal of best of 90s cartoons. You know, it's not a participation trophy. Let's not get upset about this. It medaled.
And it's third. It's third by 1 point. Because there's only 1 point in the voting that separated number 2 from number 3. So it was very, and going into like the 11th hour of our voting, Batman was number 2. But then another cartoon came and swept away and jumped to number 2. And this cartoon, when you guys hear what it is, you may feel justified a little bit. I know Darius feels like this cartoon is better than Batman the Animated Series. We're traveling through all of these worlds: Spielberg, Marvel, DC. You know, now we're going to an animation studio, a network that was a juggernaut in the 90s and the 2000s, and we're talking about Nickelodeon. You can't talk about cartoons, you can't talk about children's shows without talking about the juggernaut that is Nickelodeon. And Nickelodeon had some dogs when it comes, no, not like literal dogs, but like dogs is like some really good cartoons back in the day. And so one of them comes in here at number 2. It is a cartoon that features a group of babies: Tommy, Chucky, Phil and Lil, the toddler from hell known as Angelica. We're talking about Rugrats. Number 2 on our list of the greatest cartoons of the 90s. Rugrats had some longevity, Darius. Had some longevity. Ran from August 11th, 1991 until, 2004. That's a long time. That's what, 13 years. That is a monster. That is a very, very successful series. 9 seasons, 172 episodes, movies, video games, you name it. Rugrats was, listen, Nickelodeon was the network, but Rugrats was its own brand within itself.
Well, you said that I had some feelings. I'm feeling some kind of way about this. Obviously, with Rugrats on the board, there's no way there was room for Batman. And James is throwing some hate in that chat room.
He didn't like Rugrats.
Look at that, son. He didn't like. See, he's discredited from anything he ever said to me ever in his entire life. Let's talk about the facts here, James. Rugrats movie in '98, over 100 mil.
Wow.
Rugrats in Paris, the movie. Rugrats Go Wild. Let's talk about them being the second longest running show in Nickelodeon history. They were number one until SpongeBob came through, but they just a beast. They were supposed to come back in 2021, but it got pulled. We'll blame that on Corona. I don't know what's going on there, but you talk about the power of Rugrats, man. Look at the people who voice them. I'm gonna start off with one of my favorites, Susie. We're talking about Cree Summer, Freddie from a Different World. Ended up being Elmira on Tiny Toons. You know, when you saw that black girl on screen, we didn't see too much in cartoons. Name another. Rugrats had it, right? So we got that. And all the amazing stars that were on there. They had Gaber and Arlene were the creators. They were also the animators on The Simpsons. So that's where the power, the lineage of Rugrats comes from. The animators of The Simpsons came over to Nickelodeon and helped them kick off what was this big mega block. I'm sure Stokes is going to talk about the block that was. But also the characters on there, E.G. Daily, he business. E.G. Daily, she may be popular for other things. Probably don't know. She dated Rick Solomon, or was married to Rick Solomon. Had some tapes out there with one Paris Hilton and dated Shannon Doherty, all kind of things.
Oh boy.
So we may not go that route. That's the wrong route.
That's another episode. Okay,
my fault. Let's say they have some talent on the roster. They have some talent on the roster.
Yeah, definitely, man. Rugrats is like you said, man. It was a juggernaut, man. 20 awards during its 13-year run, 4 Daytime Emmy Awards, 6 Kid Choice Awards, and Rugrats has its own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. A cartoon has its own star on the Listen, these stats, you might be able to make an argument that Rugrats should be number one. You could very well.
My number one.
Yeah, it was your number one. It was, I think, in my top 3. I think where it actually faltered though was with the Tribe. I want to say the Tribe had it at number 4 on their list, and so because we had it so highly ranked, it got enough votes to come in here at number 2. You talk about, the movies. They had a made-for-TV special, All Grown Up, to celebrate their 10-year anniversary. They actually tried to make that into a series. They actually did make it into a series. It ran for 5 years. So, I mean, what cartoon do you know makes a spinoff of themselves? Like, usually the spinoff involves, like, another a character from the show that maybe moves on. Like, we got the Pinky and the Brain spinoff. That was a character within the whole Tiny Toons universe, and then they, it gets its own cartoon. They made a spinoff of themselves, just older, and you got Rugrats. Rugrats All Grown Up. So, they had so much going on. They had video games. They had clothes. They had it all, man. Rugrats is, a brand within itself. Steven Spielberg himself referred to the show as one of the shows that he felt was the best children's program of its time. He referred to it as the Peanuts of our time. So Charlie Brown and the gang, he said it was the Peanuts of that era. It had that level of popularity, that level of power. So you got to shout out Rugrats. We could go on and on talking about them and talking about all the awards that they won. Now, critically speaking, in terms of some of our other cartoons we discussed, like Batman the Animated Series and X-Men, where IGN and Wizard and some of these other publications rank the best cartoons of all time, Rugrats doesn't get that type of acclaim. Wizard magazine, in the top 100 greatest cartoons ever, ranked Rugrats at number 35. Still, that's
Who's
decent.
writing for them? Who's writing for them? James? Is James on that? Is he the author of that article? Get the heck out of here.
James might write for Wizard magazine. I don't know. He might. It might be one of his. He might use a pseudonym.
I know his alias.
Yeah.
You're trying to hide under an alias. I see right through it. This is bogus. Get out of here.
And then it did make TV Guide. We talked about TV Guide's list of the 60 greatest cartoons ever. Rugrats did make that list. Doesn't say where they were ranked though. Whereas Batman was number 7, Rugrats was their ranking is a mystery. However, Angelica, number 7 in TV Guide's rankings of the 50 greatest cartoon characters of all time. Angelica came in at number 7. So Rugrats is definitely one of those cartoons that, long running, very popular in its day. I mean, when you think about the most popular cartoon of the 90s, we could make a strong argument that it was definitely Rugrats. Rugrats, like Steven Spielberg said, I mean, the Peanuts were a brand. Charlie Brown had specials. Charlie Brown had movies. He had clothes. They had it all. And so memorable characters. And I think Rugrats, was cut from that same mold. So you gotta shout out Rugrats.
Yeah, and we said we could go on and on about this, and we might if it keeps going. Because I just want to point out, think about the era that was when I guess a lot of people might deem The Simpsons as the biggest. Compose those two against one another, where you've got people, this character who's telling people to eat their shorts and doing crazy stuff, mooning people, all this stuff. And on the other side, in the same time period, lives these babies that crawl around and mispronounce words and can't, figure out where they are in their backyard, get lost. I mean, it's just crazy that in a world where people were trying to go attitude era, if I may, they were wholesome and still got the job done.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we gotta move on. We could talk about Rugrats all night, and Darius would if I let him, but I'm not gonna let him do it. We're gonna move on. But before, right, we're already at number 1. But before we get to number 1, as we like to do each and every episode, we like to talk about some snubs. And in this case, we want to talk about some cartoons that did not make the honorable mention list, did not make the top 5, but garnered some votes. And we kind of felt like maybe these cartoons could have or should have been in the top 5. Darius, I'll let you have the floor. I think Tiny Toons was technically your snub. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, but take it away.
Yeah, Tiny Toons was definitely my snub. The other one that made my list, I would say regrettably so. I don't know. Listen, I still wouldn't put Batman or X-Men in there. Okay, I lie. I might let one of them in. I had Darkwing Duck on there. I don't know why. Maybe it was the catchy tune, because That theme was very catchy. Maybe because my mom bought me the magnifying glass and I would be burning ants or something with it back in the day. I don't know. But when I thought about 90s cartoons, Darkwing Duck really was one of the first cartoons that jumped out at me. But I went back and rewatched it last week, and maybe not so much.
Well, speaking of Darkwing Duck, a snub from the tribe side of things. I'll speak for the tribe here. A cartoon that got a lot of votes that was a Darkwing Duck was kind of a spawn from was DuckTales. And so the tribe really had, and as James alluded to in the chat room, there's no Darkwing Duck without DuckTales. Very, very good point. Which is exactly where I was going to segue. DuckTales received a lot of votes from the tribe. I kind of see DuckTales as more of an 80s cartoon, though. That cartoon's popularity was in the late 80s. It ran from 87 to 1990. So it really ended like at the top of the decade. So I don't know that I would call DuckTales a 90s cartoon per se. Technically, it did run in the 90s, but the tribe showed it a lot of love. So I want to go ahead and list it here as one of the snubs. It ran for 4 seasons. It ran for a total of 100 episodes. Like I said, it ran from 1987 to 1990. You had Uncle Scrooge. You had Huey, Dewey, and Louie, his nephews, who were very rambunctious, very mischievous, always in trouble, driving old Scrooge crazy. And so DuckTales was definitely one of my favorites in the 80s. DuckTales is another one of those cartoons that was, that was so popular that they actually got a movie, DuckTales Treasure of the Lost Lamp. I remember going to the movies and seeing it in 1990. It didn't do very well in the box office. However,
you was the only one that went and saw that movie.
No, man, I remember other people being there. And the plan was, again, DuckTales was very popular. So the plan was kind of to make it into a brand. And they were planning several sequels to the movie. But after that first one flopped, they 86 those plans, and DuckTales got no additional movies. They did win 2 Emmys. They won in 1989 Outstanding Animated Programming, Outstanding Film Sound Editing in 1990 as well. And in 89 and 88, they were nominated but did not win for Outstanding Animated Program. So, very, very acclaimed cartoon. Again, a cartoon is great when it can spawn into some movies. IGN ranked it as the 18th best animated TV show ever out of their top 100. So DuckTales gets a lot of love. It was supposed to be rebooted with Disney Plus and everything going on, but I guess in light of or it did get rebooted. I'm sorry, it did get rebooted. I'm thinking about who's supposed to get rebooted on Hulu?
Rugrats.
Rugrats. Is it Rugrats maybe?
No, Animaniacs. Animaniacs is supposed to get rebooted.
Animaniacs has a deal with Hulu to be rebooted, a 2-season deal to be rebooted, but that's been put on hold in light of Corona and everything. But DuckTales did get rebooted back in I think 2015, and I think it just ran for a couple of years, but did not have the same steam that it had back in the late 80s, early 90s. But gotta shout out DuckTales as a snub of the tribe. My snub, a cartoon that made my list but did not make our composite ranking, was a cartoon that was very controversial. I know a lot of parents didn't like it. The content was very sometimes gory, sometimes nasty, not the greatest, but I found these guys to be hilarious. Obviously, there was a lot of dark humor. There was sexual innuendo. which did not bode well. Well, actually, it did bode well for them, but it got them a lot of criticism. And I'm talking about the Ren and Stimpy show. Ren and Stimpy was James thought I was talking about South Park. No, but Ren and Stimpy, those guys were hilarious, man. They were South Park, probably way watered down, and then South Park was like Ren and Stimpy on steroids. Like it was just, and I mean Ren and Stimpy weren't people; they were, I don't know what the heck were Ren and Stimpy. I don't even know. I think what kind of animals?
A dog
were
and a cat.
I think so. Yeah. So they kind of. So I say South Park, but really I kind of more compare them to like a more raunchy Tom and Jerry. That's probably a better comparison for Ren and Stimpy. But Ren and Stimpy, listen, man. One of the things I don't think a lot of people know is that obviously Ren and Stimpy was a Nickelodeon cartoon, 5 seasons, 52 episodes. And listen, man, they had video games too. They had a video game. And they got a lot. They were a lot. It was a lot of controversy surrounding them just because of their content. And then I want to say that Ren and Stimpy at one time moved to Adult Swim. Is that right?
I think there was a different spin-off.
Okay.
It's Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon is I think what you're referencing. Okay.
Yeah.
That was on Spike in 2003. Oh, okay. So I don't know.
Okay, it was on Spike TV. Yeah, it was on Spike TV. So yeah, man. I mean, Ren and Stimpy, for all of their antics and all of the controversy, they gave me some good laughs over the years, man, and I actually enjoyed them.
Okay. I never got into it. I'm guessing because Mama probably caught me watching it one time and wondered what the heck was on my TV and probably demanded turn that channel real quick before some problems happens. But I understand it. It doubled like the ratings of any Nickelodeon show during its first season, so it was extremely popular. Popular.
Yeah, it was definitely popular. Had a huge cult following, and yeah, man, Ren and Stimpy is just one of those that pushed the envelope in that space at that time for sure. And so now, Darius, there can only be one. We say it every week. There can only be one, and we're going to stay with the juggernaut that is Nickelodeon. This cartoon that comes in as the GOAT, the greatest cartoon of the 90s. This cartoon, Rugrats, and Ren and the aforementioned Ren and Stimpy all came out and premiered on the same day. Can you imagine 3 cartoons of this magnitude coming out on the same day, and they all hit? I'm sure Nickelodeon at executive meeting was like, all right, if one of these hits, 1 out of the 3, 33%, yeah, we doing okay. But all 3 of them ended up being hits, ended up being ratings juggernauts. This particular cartoon started off a little slower, but ultimately ended up picking up. It was a very kind of dealt with the growing pains of I guess, late, I don't know, preteen, teenage life. And it ran for 7 seasons, 1991 to 1998, 99? 99. This cartoon comes in at number 1 on our list of the greatest cartoons of the 90s. We're talking about Doug Doug comes in at number one. Darius, I'm going to give you the floor. I know you're a big fan of Doug and everything that cartoon brought to the table.
Yeah, big fan of Doug. There's a lot of haters with Doug because I believe it was nominated multiple times for Emmys. I don't think it won, but that's okay. Let's talk about Doug, the creation of Doug. Doug was originally supposed to be just a book. That's all it was supposed to be. The author of the book wanted to make a children's book. Nobody showed interest whatsoever. The creator Jenkins got it. The book was originally called Doug Got a New Pair of Shoes. If that ain't the most Seinfeld title I've ever heard. But that kind of encapsulates what this show is all about, this 12-year-old, as you mentioned. But they flipped it. The first pilot came out, Doug can't dance. And they just really, really took off. We're talking about the main character is Doug Funny. They wanted to call it the Funnies, but they talked the creator out of that. They're like, no, just keep it simple, keep Doug. Then you have his alter ego, Quail Man, which we had popping up on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Quail Man, can't forget Quail Man. How many people put a belt around their forehead and thought they could fly like
Quail Man
when he became Quail Man? Yeah, buddy. I mean, it was just, the dog was Pork Chop. We got Skeeter on there. The music on there was different. It was like bebop, bebop, boop. So it was trying to change things up. So a lot of fun stuff when it comes to Doug.
Yeah, man. Doug was a great cartoon. And I think what made it relatable was that the characters at that time, when that show was out, they were like kind of our age, 11 years old, 12 years old, kind of going through those middle school years and kind of going through some of the struggles and things that we were going through. And of course, you shouted out Pork Chop. You shouted out Doug Funny. We got to shout out Patty Mayonnaise. Come on, man.
Patty Mayonnaise.
What kind of name is that? But Doug was in love with Patty Mayonnaise. He loved that girl.
He loved himself some mayonnaise.
He loved Patty Mayonnaise. You talked about Skeeter too. But yeah, man, Doug was a great cartoon. You talked about some of the critical acclaim, or as far as awards that it didn't get. It didn't really win a lot of Emmys, kind of like some of the other cartoons that we mentioned. Obviously, they did win a couple of Parents' Choice Awards, so it was a very popular cartoon with parents. Nickelodeon's Kids' Choice Awards, they kind of won those as well. But it was nominated for an Emmy in 1999 and 2000 for Outstanding Children's Animated Program, but it did not win. So in any event, Doug went on to debut a theatrical film in 1999 called Doug's First Movie. I remember seeing that. 19.4 million at the box office on a budget of $5 million. Not bad, right? So for an animated film, it's only going to have, obviously, Frozen and movies like that doing hundreds of millions of dollars these days. But, back in the 90s, Doug did all right. Doug's movie did okay. He had a video game on, I think, on Game Boy as well. So Doug wasn't as big of a brand, say, as Rugrats, but they had a three-headed monster at Nickelodeon. They had Doug, they had Rugrats, and they had Ren and Stimpy. And those three cartoons, generated so much revenue for Nickelodeon. Plus, you throw in all that, they had to show all that. And Nickelodeon was rolling in the dough and running very successful, cartoons and TV shows at that time.
Yeah, and you talk about like a lot of things were like very plain, very simple about this. this cartoon, which we probably didn't catch on as a youngin, a youth, is the fact that
a youngin. What's a youngman?
A youngin.
Oh, a youngin. Oh, I thought you said a youngman. I'm like, what is a youngin? A youngin. Okay, I got you.
A youngin. A youngin. So.
Youngin. All right, I'm with you. All right, my bad.
Yes. Well, we didn't catch on that when we were youngin. Was anytime the episode was supposed to take place on a Sunday, the characters were dressed in their Sunday best. So they weren't overt with the religion, but there was tones in there. It just kind of silently put it in there. And I thought it was also interesting that before he was Doug, he was originally supposed to be named Brian.
Brian? I'm glad they went with Doug because I mean, you know, I don't know if Brian would have resonated as well as Doug Funny did. I do have a little bone to pick though, with Doug being number one. Its creator, Jim Jenkins, he went to Ohio State. And so for that reason alone, he shouldn't even be in these rankings. However, you know, what's done is done. We can't change it at this point. And so we acknowledge, I do now reluctantly, now that I know what college he went to. I do it reluctantly, acknowledging it as the best cartoon of the 90s. Yeah, and James makes a great point in the chat room. The cartoon was very relatable, which is the point we made earlier. You kind of understood what Doug was going through, having a crush on a girl and having to get through school and having friends, all those things that we had going on in the 90s. You know, we could relate to Doug, you know, going through those same things. So Doug comes in at number one on our list of the greatest cartoons of the 90s. Just to recap, we have our top five. At number 5, we had Animaniacs. At number 4, we had X-Men, the cartoon series. At number 3, we had Batman, the animated series. Number 2 was Rugrats. And number 1, Doug. So Nickelodeon in the 1-2 spot for our greatest cartoons of the 90s. But I think that's a pretty good list. One of the things that we said when we were discussing the episode and going into the episode was we felt like this was the first list that we made where all three parties, you know, me, Darius, and the tribe, you know, you guys that we poll, were all kind of on one accord. I mean, we maybe had them ranked in different orders, but a lot of the same cartoons were acknowledged as great cartoons. And so that was pretty cool to see. Not as much arguing as we would like to have on the GOAT debate, but a great list, I think, nonetheless. And then we gave honorable mentions to Tiny Toons and Recess as well. So there you have it, man. We want to thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the GOAT Debate podcast. Got to shout out everybody that's been in the chat room. We had Portia earlier. We had James throwing lines in there. I saw my auntie jump in the chat room. Shout out to my auntie. But it's a great episode. We thank you guys so much for listening. Of course, be sure to follow us on social media. You can find us at GOAT_debate on Twitter and Instagram. Search the GOAT Debate podcast on Facebook, on YouTube. And Darius, we want people to subscribe as well, right?
Absolutely. That's the key there. Subscribe. And the other key is invite your peoples to come in, join the conversation, start a watch party on Facebook. For those who are listening this week, we got a monster show coming up on Friday. We normally tape on Thursday nights for those who are not live with us, usually Thursday nights, 9 p.m. We got a special episode coming out. We're talking about the best stand-up comedian of all time, but we got a hitter with us and Delay. He's a comedian. Delay. You've seen him on Comic View and Who's Got Jokes, and He's got his own podcast. He's big on Instagram as well. So make sure you tune in this Friday. Special start time, 4 p.m. Eastern. It's gonna be a really, really good show.
Yeah, definitely. We got D-Lay coming through. We're debating the best stand-up specials of all time. So, of course, having a comedian on, what better topic to discuss with a great comedian in his own right, as Darius alluded to, Comic View, Def Comedy Jam. He's been all over the country, all over the world, touring, doing comedy. So we're excited to have D-Lay on the show. James is a huge fan of D-Lay as well. I forgot to mention that because he called me when we announced that D-Lay was going to be on. And he's like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're gonna have D-Lay on." So Darius hooked that up. Darius is the man when it comes to that stuff. So we're excited about it. We've already been polling you guys on some of your favorite stand-up specials. I watched Delirious last night, Eddie Murphy Delirious last night. And 10 minutes in, I'll save it for the next episode. Man, all I'm going to say is times were different in the 80s. Some of the things that you said back then, you would get lambasted for if you said today. So I watched Delirious and I watched Tambourine, which was Chris Rock's most recent Netflix special. And I thought that one was pretty good. So we're going to talk about comedy specials. Next episode, as Darius said, this Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be sure to catch us on Facebook to see D-Lay on with us live. If you miss it, of course, you can listen to the podcast episode. We'll have it up for you guys to check out. But we're signing off tonight. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the GOAT Debate Podcast. Best cartoons of the 90s. It's Meech. It's Darius. You guys have a great night. Everybody stay safe. Everybody stay well. Keep your mental health in check in light of everything that's going on. Again, our condolences and prayers to George Floyd and his family. And keep fighting the good fight, y'all. We'll talk to y'all next time. Peace.